Irina Sebrova is sitting in the cockpit of a plywood biplane at 2 in the morning, engine cut to idle, gliding in silence toward a German artillery position she cannot see but knows is there. The aircraft makes almost no sound. Below her, enemy soldiers are asleep. She has done this before. She will do it 1,007 more times. Before the war, Irina Sebrova was a flight instructor. She was 20 years old, teaching men to fly, in a country that had decided, unlike every other major power on Earth, that women were capable of doing exactly that. When Germany crossed the Soviet border on June 22, 1941, she did not wait to be asked. What she joined was not a prestigious fighter regiment. It was the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, later renamed the 46th Guards, and it was flying the Polikarpov Po-2, a two-seat biplane built in the 1920s for crop dusting. Its maximum speed was 94 miles per hour. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 that might intercept it flew at 385. It carried 770 pounds of bombs, had no armor plating, no parachutes most of the time, and was made largely of canvas and wood. When it was hit by tracer fire, it burned like paper. The women who flew it knew all of this when they climbed in. The tactical logic behind the regiment was sound, even if the equipment was not. The German army in 1942 was a highly efficient machine that depended on rest, maintenance cycles, and predictable nighttime recovery. The Po-2 flew too slowly to appear on German radar. It flew too low to be easily tracked by searchlights. Flown with the engine throttled back on the final approach, it was nearly silent until it was directly overhead. Germans could not sleep. That was the point. An army that cannot sleep makes mistakes, misses maintenance schedules, loses coordination, breaks down. The 588th flew sometimes 8, sometimes 15 sorties per night per pilot. Night after night, month after month, across 4 years of war, the regiment was all female, from pilots and navigators down to the ground crews who loaded the bombs and patched the aircraft between sorties. Marina Raskova, the most famous Soviet aviatrix of the 1930s, and a woman with direct access to Stalin, had personally argued for their formation, writing letters that cut through military bureaucracy by going over its head entirely. Stalin approved the regiment on October 8, 1941. Within months, they were flying combat missions, what the German soldiers who first encountered them did not know. And what took some time for German intelligence to accept was that these aircraft were being flown by women. When they figured it out, they named the regiment the Night Witches, Nachthexen, intending it as contempt. The regiment adopted the name immediately. German pilots were told that any man who shot down a night witch would receive the Iron Cross. The implication being that it was considered a significant enough achievement to warrant a medal. Shooting down a plywood biplane, flying at night over your own lines was, apparently, harder than it sounded. The reason was a tactic the regiment developed early in their operational history and refined into something approaching an art form. 3 aircraft would approach a target together. 2 would fly directly over the German searchlights, drawing their beams upward and the anti-aircraft guns with them. The third, flying slightly behind and offset, cut her engine and glide in silence, while the guns were occupied, release her bombs, restart the engine and disappear into the darkness before the German gunners could reacquire her. Then the 2 decoy aircraft would break away. Then one of them would become the bomber and the other 2 the decoys. They rotated. They never stopped. Zhenya Rudneva, 20-year-old astronomy student from Moscow State University, wrote in her diary, on the way to the front, that she thought she was living the happiest days of her life. She meant it. The comradeship of the regiment was not something any of them had anticipated finding in a war. She described the smell of the engines, the particular cold of open cockpits at altitude, the way the horizon looked, from 500 meters at 3 in the morning. She was methodical and precise and passionate about the stars. She wrote letters to her parents describing everything except the parts that would worry them. On April 9th, 1944, her aircraft did not return from a mission over Crimea. She was 23 years old. Her body was recovered and buried as an unknown soldier. Her name was not formally identified at her burial site until 1966. In 1972, astronomers named an asteroid after her. It is still out there. What made the Night Witches operationally significant was not the drama but the arithmetic. The regiment flew over 23,000 sorties during the war. They bombed German positions from the Caucasus to Berlin, following the front lines west as the war turned, moving their airfields forward as the Red Army advanced, sometimes landing in forest clearings to discover, as happened once in Belarusia, German tanks were camouflaged 50 meters away. On that occasion they took off immediately, running on fumes before the Germans could react. The anti-aircraft fire was constant. The searchlights were constant. The losses were not constant in the way that made them a statistic, because in a regiment of 261 women, every death was personal. Irina Sebrova, the navigator who had once held her dead pilot's body off the control stick with one hand while landing a damaged aircraft with the other, was killed on the night of July 31st, 1943, when German fighters used searchlights to illuminate the biplanes for attack, a new tactic the regiment had not faced before. Maria Smirnova, the deputy commander who had been flying combat since June 1942, watched 4 aircraft burn in the air behind her that night and could do nothing. She had more experience than the younger pilots following her, which was why she survived. They did not. Smirnova kept flying. She flew combat until the last week of the war. She received the Hero of the Soviet Union. 23 women in the regiment did. Irina Sebrova, the flight commander who flew 1,008 sorties without being killed, received it too. The number 1008 is worth sitting with for a moment. It means that for the entire duration of the war, across 4 years of night operations over enemy territory, in an aircraft that could be downed by a single rifle bullet through the right part of the engine, Sebrova flew, on average, a combat mission every day and a half. She never stopped. When the regiment flew its last operation on May 4th, 1945, 2 days before Germany surrendered, Sebrova was in the air. When the war ended, the regiment was disbanded. Its members were released back to civilian life. Some had married, some went back to the jobs they had before. Maria Smirnova tried to build a career in Soviet civil aviation. She could not. The war had done things to her physically and mentally that no airline would accept, and no Soviet system was willing to acknowledge or treat. The female regiments were denied permission to participate in the victory flyover in Moscow. The official reason given was that their aircraft were too slow. The actual reason required no explanation for anyone paying attention. The stories survived anyway. They survived because the women told them to each other every year on May 2nd at their regiment reunions. Getting older in a country that had moved on from needing them, pegged. Talking about the dead and the living and the dark and the noise of the anti-aircraft guns, and the particular silence of an engine cut to idle above a German position at 2 in the morning. Go back to that cockpit. Go back to Sebrova in the dark with the engine off, and the German camp below her, and the bombs in their racks, and the wind through the open cockpit, and absolutely nothing between her and the ground except 500 meters of cold air and 30 years of life she has not lived yet. She does not hesitate. She has not hesitated 1,007 times before this. The bombs fall. The engine restarts. She climbs back into the dark, and nobody below her knows which direction she came from or where she went. 108 times. The Germans never slept. Germany lost.